The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine has prompted both the European Union and the United States to impose tough sanctions on Russia, particularly targeting banking institutions like Gazprom Bank. While these measures are intended to penalize Russia, they also risk compromising Europe's energy security and economic stability. Recent talks between the EU and the US about possibly easing some sanctions highlight Europe's growing concerns about energy and the complex balancing act between political goals and economic realities. The situation escalated today with announcements from both Russian and Ukrainian leaders, who have rejected any possibility of renewing a key gas transit agreement for Europe. This has caused a spike in gas futures prices. Ukrainian officials have decided not to extend the current 5-year contract for transporting Russian gas across their territory beyond its expiration at the end of this month. Russian President Vladimir Putin, speaking in Moscow, stated that the issue is not their concern, emphasizing that Gazprom, Russia's state-controlled energy giant, will continue to survive even without the contract. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Brussels made it clear that Ukraine would no longer facilitate Russian gas transit. There will be no such contract, he said, signaling an end to any arrangement with Russia moving forward. With less than 2 weeks until the new year, European countries like Slovakia are struggling to find alternative agreements that satisfy Ukraine's terms. Ukraine has consistently rejected any deal that would allow Russian gas to continue flowing, as this would effectively sustain the Kremlin's revenue stream. Regional energy companies are now pushing for some form of agreement that would keep Russian gas flowing through Ukraine into Europe. Without such an agreement, countries will have to find more expensive alternatives, increasing pressure in the final 12 days of the year. This critical period could either result in a last-minute solution or a halt to a decades-old transit route for Russian gas into Europe. European gas markets responded sharply to the news. After initially falling by 3%, prices rebounded by as much as 5.6%, marking their largest daily increase in over a month, which highlights the market's current anxiety. Several contingency plans have been proposed, such as European buyers purchasing gas directly at the Russia-Ukraine border, or creating a swap arrangement with third-party suppliers like Azerbaijan. However, Zelenskyy made it clear that even these alternatives would still fund Russia's activities. He explained that if another country buys Russian gas before it crosses into Ukraine and then passes it along, it essentially amounts to financing Moscow's war efforts. Currently, approximately 15 billion cubic meters of Russian gas still transit through Ukraine each year to various European destinations, despite nearly 3 years of war. Between Kiev and Moscow, remaining Gazprom clients in the region are now scrambling to ensure there are no disruptions to their natural gas supplies this winter. Gazprom Bank plays a crucial role in facilitating Russia's gas exports to Europe. However, U.S. sanctions on the bank have raised concerns about the reliability of continued Russian gas flows. Although President Vladimir Putin has authorized foreign buyers to use alternative banks instead of Gazprom Bank, significant financial and legal uncertainties persist. As a result, European energy companies and governments are struggling to secure gas supplies without violating the complex sanctions framework. This issue has intensified with Bulgaria now threatening to halt the transit of Russian natural gas through its territory, a move that could significantly disrupt regional energy security. The situation has become more complicated due to U.S. sanctions targeting Gazprom, Russia's state-owned energy giant, and its financial arm, Gazprom Bank. These sanctions have cast doubt on acceptable payment methods for gas transit services, exacerbating an already fragile energy situation. Bulgaria's stance is firm. Its energy minister, Vladimir Malinov, has made it clear that Bulgartransgaz, the national grid operator, will block any gas transit unless payments fully comply with existing contracts. The core of the problem lies in the dependency on Gazprom Bank to manage payments for the Turkstream pipeline, which crosses Bulgarian territory. This pipeline is critical, transporting roughly 18 billion cubic meters of gas annually to countries like Serbia, Hungary, and other nations in the Western Balkans. The timing of this standoff is particularly sensitive, with Europe bracing for rising energy demands during winter. Any serious disruption to these gas flows could exacerbate supply shortages, cause shockwaves in energy markets, and drive up costs for both consumers and businesses. While Bulgaria has continued to receive payments for transit services up to now, the approaching December 20th deadline, when U.S. sanctions will fully take effect, has heightened the urgency. Without a viable payment alternative, halting gas transit becomes increasingly likely. Restricting Russian energy imports carries significant economic consequences for the EU. Energy accounts for a major portion of the EU's total imports, meaning disruptions or price increases could raise production costs, inflate consumer prices, and put additional strain on the economy. Energy-intensive industries may scale back operations, resulting in job losses and slower economic growth. Additionally, turning to alternative suppliers, such as U.S. liquefied natural gas, LNG, typically comes at a higher price than Russian pipeline gas. The escalation of input costs has begun to significantly impact the entire supply chain, driving inflation and severely eroding consumers' disposable income. This inflationary pressure does not only affect individual households, but ripples through broader economic activity across the European Union. As the cost of living rises, businesses struggle with rising operational costs, and consumer spending slows down, further hindering the economic recovery. The consequences of this dynamic are becoming more evident, as it dampens demand in multiple sectors, and economic growth across the EU continues to decelerate. Compounding these economic strains are the far-reaching sanctions imposed on Gazprom Bank, which have disrupted more than just energy transactions. While the goal of these sanctions is to penalize Russia for its actions in Ukraine, they have inadvertently sent shockwaves through the financial sector. European banks, fearing violations of U.S. sanctions, have become highly reluctant to engage with Gazprom Bank. This has made it increasingly difficult to structure and facilitate energy deals, which are vital for the EU's energy security. This hesitation within the financial sector has a cascading effect, slowing down investments in energy infrastructure and delaying the start of new energy projects. This delay only prolongs Europe's energy difficulties, leaving the continent vulnerable to energy shortages. Furthermore, the convoluted payment methods required to circumvent the sanctions, such as routing payments through subsidiaries in Luxembourg or utilizing third-party intermediaries, introduce additional uncertainty into the process. Financial institutions are now required to proceed with extreme caution to avoid running afoul of potential penalties, complicating and delaying energy-related transactions. These layers of uncertainty are destabilizing markets and have a direct impact on energy security. The mounting severity of Europe's ongoing energy crisis has prompted both EU and US policymakers to reconsider the rigidity of their sanctions, acknowledging that maintaining the sanctions on Gazprom Bank might be counterproductive in terms of ensuring energy security and economic stability. As a result, discussions have begun regarding potential adjustments or relaxations of these sanctions. Among the potential compromises being explored are sanction carve-outs, which could allow for payments through alternative channels or affiliated entities. These moves would help reduce transactional obstacles while still upholding the core goals of the sanctions. This shift in policy underscores a pragmatic recognition that balancing political, economic, and security objectives is essential. While both the EU and US remain steadfast in their commitment to penalize Russia for its actions in Ukraine, the urgent need for a consistent and affordable energy supply in Europe has made it clear that a more flexible and adaptable approach is needed. This evolving stance highlights the intricate relationship between energy policy, economic well-being, and geopolitical strategy, and how they must be recalibrated to ensure stability in the face of ongoing challenges. The situation is becoming even more critical as Northwest Europe braces for a dramatic drop in temperatures next week, expected to fall well below seasonal norms. This sudden shift in weather will put Europe's energy infrastructure to the test, just as gas reserves are depleting rapidly following a period of milder weather. The sharp decline in temperatures will trigger a surge in heating demand across countries like Germany and France, placing immense pressure on an already fragile energy system. In addition, low wind output during this period has limited the production of renewable energy, exacerbating the reliance on gas-fired electricity generation. This convergence of factors has driven gas prices up by around 50% this year alone, further straining European economies. Countries that were previously highly reliant on Russian gas are now navigating a web of complications that are growing more intricate as the December 20th, 2024 deadline for U.S. sanctions on Gazprom Bank approaches. These sanctions, aimed at curbing Russia's military funding, have created significant challenges for countries like Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria, which have long-term gas supply contracts with Gazprom. The sanctions have created barriers that are preventing standard payment procedures, which could destabilize energy supplies throughout Europe. As we continue to observe this evolving crisis, we will delve into the broader conflict between Russia and multiple European countries, examining the significant disruptions caused by Russia's decision to cut off gas supplies. We will also analyze the recent U.S. sanctions on Gazprom Bank, looking at how they might further sever Russian gas supplies to Europe, and the repercussions of such an action on the continent's ability to cope with what is shaping up to be one of the most challenging winters in recent memory. Before we go deeper into this discussion, we'd like to pause for a moment. If you've been finding this video informative so far, we would greatly appreciate it if you could hit the like button to help us reach a wider audience. Sharing your thoughts and feedback in the comments also has an enormous impact, and we thank you for your support. Now let's dive back into the heart of the issue. Hungary, in particular, is expressing deep concern over potential interruptions to gas shipments through Ukraine, which remains an essential transit route for Russian gas into Europe. Meanwhile, Slovakia is actively pursuing measures to ensure the continuation of its gas supplies, taking every possible step to mitigate the risks posed by the sanctions. Austria, too, is facing renewed pressure after OMV AG, a major Austrian oil and gas company, halted payments to Gazprom, forcing the country to adapt to the rapidly shifting landscape of European energy supplies. At the same time, Turkey, a significant transit country for Russian gas through the Turk Stream pipeline, is currently in negotiations with the US to secure exceptions that would allow continued use of Gazprom Bank. European gas futures are already edging toward their highest levels in over a year, prompting multiple nations to explore alternative solutions to these sanctions. Some are investigating options like routing payments through other sanctioned Russian banks, while others are seeking special licenses from the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, to continue energy-related transactions. Among the more promising proposals are targeted waivers for specific customers or revising contracts with Gazprom to create more flexibility in meeting supply requirements. However, these potential solutions come with the risk of protracted legal and diplomatic disputes that could prolong the instability. The hostilities between Russia and Ukraine, which erupted in February 2022, have dramatically strained the energy relationship between Russia and the European Union. Russia, which once supplied nearly 40% of the EU's natural gas, has seen its role dramatically reduced, both due to the imposition of sanctions and accusations that it has used energy supplies as a tool of political leverage. The Nord Stream pipeline, a critical infrastructure for natural gas deliveries, has already experienced significant reductions in capacity and ultimately came to a halt. Furthermore, countries that refused to engage in ruble-based transactions found their gas deliveries abruptly severed, further disrupting supply lines. In response to these challenges, the EU has accelerated its search for alternative energy sources, significantly increasing imports of liquefied natural gas, LNG, from the US and Qatar, and making more aggressive investments in renewable energy. However, this transition is far from smooth, and coupled with ongoing market turbulence, it has resulted in gas prices reaching unprecedented highs. In 2022, prices exceeded 300 EUR per megawatt-hour, placing an immense financial burden on households and businesses alike. The strain on European natural gas markets continues, with prices rising in the face of renewed geopolitical tensions. As of November 2024, the Dutch Tidal Transfer Facility (TTF) benchmark rose by 2.61% to 468.6 EUR per megawatt-hour, reflecting growing investor concerns about the looming threat of supply disruptions. These concerns are amplified by Ukraine's ongoing use of advanced missile systems targeting Russian energy infrastructure, as well as the impending expiration of the Russia-Ukraine gas transit agreement. Developments such as these could lead to further constriction of gas supplies into Europe, further destabilizing the market. Meanwhile, in the UK, the energy regulator, Ofgem, has raised the energy price cap by 20% for 2024, citing mounting wholesale costs exacerbated by political instability. As the energy crisis continues to unfold across Europe, the coming months will be critical in determining whether the region can navigate the complex and evolving landscape of energy security, geopolitical tensions, and economic stability. The path forward will require flexibility, creativity, and a careful balancing of political priorities, ensuring that Europe can maintain access to vital energy resources while continuing to hold Russia accountable for its actions. The ongoing energy crisis in Europe is driving up household energy bills, with the average annual cost now soaring to an alarming €1,738. This sharp increase underscores not just the immediate financial burden on European consumers, but also the broader long-term repercussions of the ongoing geopolitical tensions and energy supply disruptions. The ramifications of this situation extend far beyond the wallets of citizens, affecting industries, governments, and international relations, fundamentally reshaping Europe's energy landscape. To understand the profound shifts occurring today, it's essential to examine the historical context of energy trade between Russia and Europe, which has undergone significant transformations over the past several decades. A historical perspective on Russia-EU energy relations. The seeds of the deep energy ties between Russia and Europe were planted long before the present crisis, with substantial energy trade between the Soviet Union and European nations taking root in the late 1960s. Austria was a pioneer in importing Soviet gas, and the first pipelines, such as the Druzhba pipeline, operational since 1964, served as critical conduits for oil supplies to Eastern Bloc allies. By the early 1980s, the construction of the Urengoy-Pomary-Uzhgorod pipeline, expanded Soviet gas exports significantly, reaching into Western Europe. By the late 1980s, Soviet gas had become a cornerstone of energy consumption for countries like Germany and France. During the Reagan administration in the United States, concerns mounted over Western Europe's increasing dependence on Soviet energy resources. Washington feared that such dependence would ultimately translate into greater Soviet political influence over Europe. Despite efforts by the United States to thwart pipeline projects through restrictions on technology and equipment sales, European nations persisted, and Russian gas became firmly integrated into their energy portfolios. The post-Soviet era and the expansion of EU-Russia energy ties. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, EU-Russia energy cooperation flourished under the 1994 Partnership and Cooperation Agreement, PCA. This agreement was designed to promote political stability, economic freedom, peace, and security while fostering a robust economic partnership. By 2005, energy had become the bedrock of EU-Russia trade, with total trade volumes exceeding $166 billion. Russia enjoyed a trade surplus of approximately $50 billion, which accounted for around 8% of its GDP. Meanwhile, the European Union remained Russia's largest trading partner, with over half of Russia's total trade volume flowing to the EU. This arrangement was mutually beneficial, driven by complementary economic structures. Roughly 65% of the EU's imports from Russia consisted of energy products, while the EU sourced about 28% of its energy from Russia. In some European countries, such as Germany and Italy, this reliance reached 100%, making them particularly vulnerable to any disruptions in Russian energy supplies. The turning point: the 2014 Ukraine crisis and the annexation of Crimea. However, 2014 marked a dramatic shift in EU-Russia relations, beginning with Russia's annexation of Crimea and its involvement in the conflict in Ukraine. The EU responded with sweeping sanctions aimed at crippling key sectors of the Russian economy, including energy, finance, and defense. These sanctions targeted Russia's access to European markets and technologies, disrupting long-standing energy relationships. The sanctions were designed to limit Russia's ability to develop new energy resources, particularly in the deep water, Arctic, and shale sectors, by restricting access to specialized energy equipment. In retaliation, Russia began to pivot its focus eastward, seeking to strengthen its energy ties with China and other Asian nations in an effort to mitigate the loss of European markets. This strategic realignment was aimed at reducing Russia's economic vulnerabilities by diversifying its customer base and ensuring that it was no longer as dependent on Europe for energy exports. The sanctions and Russia's shift toward Asia led to a sharp decline in EU-Russia trade, with energy imports from Russia falling drastically. In parallel, the EU intensified its search for alternative energy sources, ramping up liquefied natural gas, LNG imports, and investing heavily in renewable energy infrastructure. These moves were part of a broader strategy to reduce Europe's dependency on Russian energy and bolster its energy security. The impact of the Ukraine conflict: a drastic reduction in Russian energy flows. The ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine has taken a severe toll on EU-Russia energy relations, with unprecedented sanctions leading to a dramatic reduction in Russian energy flows to Europe. Between the first quarter of 2022 and the third quarter of 2024, EU imports from Russia plummeted by 86%, with petroleum oil imports falling to just 7% of their 2021 levels. This sharp decline has had profound effects on the EU's trade balance with Russia, with the trade deficit shrinking from $46 billion in the second quarter of 2022 to a mere $0.6 billion by the third quarter of 2024. Austria, which has historically served as a key gas hub for Europe, has also been notably affected. OMV, Austria's leading energy company, recently announced that Gazprom had ceased gas deliveries due to arbitration-related disputes, resulting in a 2.7% increase in gas prices. This interruption highlights the fragility of Europe's energy supply chain and underscores the critical need for a more diversified energy portfolio. A bitterly cold winter ahead, straining Europe's energy infrastructure. Europe is now bracing for what could be its coldest winter in years, further intensifying pressure on an already fragile energy system. Despite forecasts predicting that temperatures will remain slightly above historical averages, the winter is still expected to be colder than recent years. This scenario places immense strain on Europe's energy infrastructure, including storage capacities and power generation systems, which are already grappling with reduced Russian gas imports. Germany, the largest power market in Europe, is facing elevated heating demand. Projections for the next 6 to 10 days suggest an increase of about 18 heating degree days, 3 more than the 10-year seasonal average. This means that Germany will likely experience heavier gas consumption for heating purposes, further compounding the energy challenges faced across the continent. The transformational impact on Europe's energy outlook. The confluence of U.S. sanctions, Russian withdrawal of gas supplies, and the broader geopolitical turmoil has fundamentally altered Europe's energy outlook. Russia, once a dominant supplier of nearly 40% of Europe's natural gas, has seen its position erode, leaving a significant supply gap and triggering turmoil in global energy markets. The price of gas has skyrocketed, with household and industrial consumers facing skyrocketing costs. From an average of $109 per megawatt-hour in 2020, prices surged to over $300 per megawatt-hour in 2022 and have remained elevated into 2023. These price spikes have severely impacted industrial output, eroded competitiveness, and placed significant pressure on household budgets. Although European governments have intervened with subsidies and price caps to mitigate the immediate effects, these measures have placed additional strain on public finances. With winter approaching, concerns about energy supply shortfalls are intensifying, and despite efforts to refill storage, levels remain lower than desired, raising the specter of blackouts or the need for energy rationing. Germany's response: a shift toward coal and nuclear power. Germany, confronted with the looming energy crisis, has been forced to reactivate coal-fired power plants and delay the retirement of its remaining nuclear reactors. These measures, while providing short-term relief, underscore the growing uncertainty surrounding Europe's energy future and the difficult trade-offs that European governments must make between meeting immediate energy needs and long-term environmental goals. The expiration of the Russia-Ukraine gas transit agreement. Adding to the complexity of Europe's energy predicament is the looming expiration of the Russia-Ukraine gas transit agreement at the end of 2024. This agreement has secured the flow of around 40 billion cubic meters of gas to Central and Eastern Europe annually. If it lapses, Europe could lose a crucial artery for gas transport, exacerbating supply uncertainties and complicating already delicate negotiations with alternative suppliers. The urgent need for a diversified energy portfolio. The combination of sanctions, supply disruptions, and geopolitical instability underscores Europe's urgent need for a more resilient and diversified energy portfolio. However, achieving this goal presents formidable challenges. European nations are struggling to balance the immediate need for energy security with their long-term aspirations for stability, sustainability, and reduced external dependence. Conclusion: in conclusion, Europe's energy crisis has evolved into a severe and multifaceted issue, reshaping not only the continent's energy landscape, but also its geopolitical future. With Russia's role as a major energy supplier diminished, Europe is left grappling with the complex task of securing alternative energy sources while navigating an increasingly volatile global energy market. The coming winter promises to be a test of Europe's resolve, as the continent faces both immediate supply challenges and long-term uncertainties about its energy future. Thank you for watching. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today. If this video resonated with you or sparked inspiration, please consider expressing your support by liking and subscribing to stay connected with our community. Your support means the world to us. Feel free to explore another video on our channel, which is now on the screen.